Hello, and welcome to another wonderful WordSesh. It is my honor and privilege to be here presenting with you guys tonight. My name is Brian Richards, and I run WPSessions.com, which was actually inspired by the very first WordSesh. So I'm excited to actually be here and be presenting and to actually be partnering with Scott and everyone else who's running the event to help make it even better than it has been the previous 2 years. I'm going to pause for just a few seconds here while this lands on your screen, which might seem weird, but there's actually about a 40-second delay from when the Hangout starts being broadcast to when you actually hear what's going on, which is why you may have noticed that some of the questions being answered seem out of sync with when you're actually asking them. I do want to encourage you to make sure to use the questions feature here on the site because very much of my presentation depends on it. So definitely, please ask me lots and lots of questions because that's why I'm here, to answer and to hopefully give you a better opportunity to know what you're doing. My presentation, if you weren't already aware, is called Doing More with WooCommerce, or a better title might be Bending WooCommerce to Your Will. This is a talk, it's a riff on a talk that I gave at WooConf back at the beginning of November, and I've modified it a little bit, and so we're going to see how it goes. I have no idea how long it's going to take, so it might only take 5 minutes, which gives me 40 minutes to answer all of your questions. More likely it'll take probably the whole time, but we'll see. So I'm going to switch here to sharing my entire screen, which is going to look really weird because you're going to see my wonderful face, and now you're going to see the screen going ad infinity. Crazy. All right, so let's enter full screen here. So we're going to be doing more with WooCommerce today. And as I already said, we're going to be bending WooCommerce to our will, just like it were a little paper clip. And before I dive into any of the technical stuff, because this is somewhat a developer talk, but it's also somewhat a shop owner talk, and it's also somewhat a product manager talk, we're going to hit on a lot of different topics. And so in order to do that well, I have 4 simple rules that we're going to cover for doing amazing things with e-commerce sites. All right, I had to get my water. Number 1, all right, this is a very important rule. Things are only as complicated as you choose to make them. And I'm going to illustrate my point here by reminding you all that WooCommerce and Easy Digital Downloads and iThemes Exchange and JigoShop and all of the other platforms, they're all WordPress plugins, right? Plugins aren't that complicated of a concept. Now, as we learned from the plugin roundtable that just concluded, a plugin could be hundreds of thousands of lines of code. It could actually be a very complicated thing, but at the end of the day, it's just a plugin. And the way that most of the plugins work for WordPress, most of the e-commerce plugins, is using the existing schema. So that means that the contents are just posts and terms and meta and site options. And if you're a plugin developer, these are things that you're working with all day, every day, anyway. So they're very familiar things. Some of them go into using custom tables. Some of them modify their own behavior to work a little bit differently than WordPress. But for our intents and purposes, what I'm going to be talking about with WooCommerce here, we're just working with posts and meta and options. And another nice thing, at least for WooCommerce, is that the template files are extremely granular. You can modify just the single product within a loop in your shop without having to modify the entire shop archive. And there are hooks everywhere. WooCommerce is littered with hooks. Easy Digital Downloads is littered with hooks. iThemes Exchange is littered with hooks. So if you need to change the behavior, if you need to add something of your own and inject it somewhere, you can do that because there are so many hooks. And of course, if we're talking about just stuff on the front end, you could modify the template files. You could bypass using hooks entirely and just change the design you want there. I would urge you to exercise caution in doing that, of course, because sometimes there are breaking changes that come about in e-commerce platforms, and that becomes particularly apparent if you've modified the template files significantly and they're injecting new pieces of the e-commerce platform. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Things are only as complicated as you make them. And to go along with that, before you start on a solution, make sure that you actually know the problem that you're setting out to solve. And make sure, first and foremost, that you are solving the right problem. This is a particularly good piece of advice when a client comes to you and says, hey, I need this solution, and can you build it for me? And usually the answer is, well, yeah, of course, just make a plugin. But where I like to start is to ask, what problem are we actually trying to solve here? Because sometimes they think that they've come up with the right solution, and really they're just solving a symptom of the actual problem. And I found that in talking with clients that when we can get to the root of what the problem actually is, we can build a much better solution for them. And then usually what I like to do from there on out is to choose the easiest solution and then iterate. So rather than build a really, really complex solution to a problem, I like to break the problem down into smaller pieces and solve each piece in order, and then iterate on each of those solutions until we find the best possible solution. Excuse me, needed to take a drink. And you could think of this as rapid prototyping or building minimum viable products or a whole lot of other ways. But make sure that you are solving the right problem and that you're starting with the easiest solution and working forward, because things are only as complicated as you make them. If you start out with a really elaborate solution, it is a whole lot more difficult to backtrack and try to come up with a simpler solution. Number 2, your first priority is to build sites that are easy for customers to use. And improving management of a shop is a distant second, and I mean really distant. And this is a problem that I used to get wrong a lot of the time. I love making good interfaces for administration. I love making it as easy as possible for me personally to work with a tool. And that is the absolute wrong thing to do if your goal is to make a very, very successful e-commerce shop. Yes, you want to make it not unbearable for you or for whoever the shop owner is to manage. Like, the goal is to give them a tool that they can work with quickly and easily. But paramount to that, the most important goal, your first priority, is to make a site that is easy for their customers to use. Every single effort should support the customers. Because if things aren't easy for the customers, they leave. And then eventually you have no customers. More likely what happens is you have fewer customers and you're leaving lots of money on the table because customers aren't going to put up with the junk from your shop. I'm going to pause here for a moment to remind you to please ask questions and use the awesome question feature that exists here. I'm going to answer them all towards the end, but you should start asking them now so we have a nice queue of questions to go through. Now, back to our customers. If things aren't easy for them, they're going to leave. And I'm talking about things like the speed of your site, extra form fields that they don't necessarily need to fill out, but you're asking for anyway, any sort of display issues that they might have, and things like that. All of these create friction, and buyers hate friction. Think about you as a customer. You're going to a site, you're going to buy something. How frustrating is it to you when that site is moving slowly, or they're asking for way more information than you need to give them at this point in time, or any number of other things? Maybe the buy button for a product doesn't jump out at you. It's just a tiny link somewhere hidden in the content. You really have to hunt around to buy it. That means you are really interested in picking up what they have to sell, because otherwise you would have left long ago. There's an amazing stat that Aaron Jorbin shared with me at WP Sessions almost a year ago, and I forgot to look up the specifics of the stat, but a research group conducted a series of tests on the page load of an e-commerce site, and they found that an increase of 1 second on the page load time, which of course is a trivial amount of time. We passed 5 seconds in me saying that's a trivial amount of time. So adding 1 second to the page load time caused a significant drop in customer engagement, which led to a significant drop in revenue. And I forget the exact percentages. I think it might have been 8%, we'll say. And this means that if you're dealing with, say, tens of thousands of dollars a month in revenue, you're leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on the table for customers who just up and went away because your site was taking too long to load. Because after all, it's not just 1 second on their overall experience, it's 1 second per page. And then how many pages are they going through? So make sure that when you're building an e-commerce site, you are taking every effort possible to make that thing as fast as possible. The next thing is form fields. You should be asking for as little info as possible, because if people have to fill in lots and lots of form fields, they get fatigue and they eventually say, you know what, I'm not that interested in buying this thing. You're asking for my daytime phone number and my business phone number and my cell phone number, and I really only have one phone number, but all three of these fields are required for some reason. I'm out. And then third, display issues. Can people easily find and buy products in your site? Is it easy to get to the products? Is it easy to know what button to click to buy the product? From there, is it easy to follow the process all the way through to checkout? And then are there any distractions along the way in checkout? If you were to buy something from Amazon.com, you may not have paid close attention to this. Everything else disappears the moment that you enter their checkout funnel. The navigation is gone. The logo in the header doesn't even link to anything. It's just their logo. Most of the stuff from the footer is gone. The only action you can take from that point on, unless you use the back button or navigate away using the address bar, is to complete that checkout, because that is their sole purpose of having this page, is to make sure that you make it through to checkout, that you open up your wallet and you give them some of your hard-earned dollars to buy the products that they're selling, and you don't go to a competitor. So they've taken away literally every other option. Customers are important, and Amazon knows that they are the first priority. Number 3, regularly test your system end to end. Don't throw away sales because you know that everything works. And I have "no" in quotes here because you don't actually know that everything works unless you've actually tested everything. You could assume that things work. You tested things when you launched the shop, and yeah, everything worked perfectly then. But does it work perfectly now? When did you last test a real purchase? Did you test a purchase in every single payment gateway that you offer? Did you use PayPal? Did you use Stripe? Did you check out with check payment? You know, how many different payment gateways does this shop have? Did you test checking out with invalid data? Right? Did you put in an improper zip code? Did you put in an improper email address? Most of the e-commerce plugins for WordPress have checks built in to make sure that you can't check out with invalid data, but maybe you have a script that is causing a conflict from another plugin. And have you tested things from beginning to end, from when you first hit the home page to browsing to where the products are, to adding a product to the cart, going from the cart to the checkout, etc.? And then what about after the checkout process? Have you seen the confirmation page? Is it very clear to you that this transaction is successfully over? Did you get the receipt emailed to you, etc.? And then how about testing the customer experience? This ties into my previous point. How many steps did it take the customer from start to end? How many clicks did they have to do from the moment they said, I want to get this product from this company, to when they had finally finished giving you their money? How much time elapsed total from the start of their purchase to the very, very end? And how many emails are they receiving? Right? Are they getting an email to say, thank you for your order, we're processing it, and then another email to say, hey, your order is complete and we're ready to ship it, and then another email to say, hey, thank you for joining our mailing list, can you please confirm your email? And then a fourth one to say, thank you for confirming your email, you're now part of our mailing list. Or are they getting just one email that says, hey, thanks for everything here, you can follow the progress here, we've added you to our mailing list, etc.? You want to make this as enjoyable as possible for the customers, because that's how they're going to tell their friends their experience. They're going to say, man, this was pretty awesome. You should definitely check out this shop. They're not going to say, yeah, this place was okay. I got 4 emails from them. People don't talk about mediocre experiences. They talk about over-the-top amazing experiences. So see about what you can do to make their experience amazing. not just before you get their money, but after you get their money, because most people don't care about the after part, and that's when you have an opportunity to wow them. And then, is there anything non-obvious about your sales process? Was it hard to say, I want to add 2 of these items to my cart? Or once you're in the cart, is it hard to say, you know what, I actually only want 1 of these? Or no, I want a third. So be on the lookout for non-obvious things, or anything that could be causing friction for your customers and causing them to leave. Not just huge egregious bugs like script errors that are preventing people from giving you their credit card or anything else. And then if you're looking for a way to make this process more enjoyable, I would encourage you to check out acceptance testing. There's a really cool library that I've just started playing with called Codeception, and I'll have some links a little bit later. These are some of the things that I added that I didn't make slides for. And Codeception lets you write fairly simple acceptance tests in fairly simple language that actually browse the site like a real user would. And you can say, when I click on this, I expect to see this, and I expect to be taken to this page. And it works fairly similar to unit tests in PHP, if you're familiar with those. But it's actually testing the entire system end to end from a particular user's experience. And then you can tie your tests into a continuous integration tool like Travis CI or Scrutinizer CI. And every time you commit new code to your project, it runs through the acceptance tests and says, uh-oh, I can't actually complete a checkout successfully anymore. Something broke here. And that is an amazing burden lifted off your chest, because you can confidently push code for a project and know that you didn't break the user experience, which is fantastic. But even still, I would encourage you to manually test things, even with some sort of automated acceptance test process in place. And then finally, rule number 4, and I can't stress how important this one is: make things awesome. Don't waste your time on junk. You are dying right now. And because you're dying, you need to ask yourself very seriously, is this how you want to use these last few precious minutes of your life? If the answer is no, you should really reevaluate what you're doing and try to build something more awesome. If it's yes, fantastic, way to go. Keep building awesome things and don't stop. To kind of compound on my point of don't ask for more than you absolutely need, this is the checkout form on WPSessions.com. This is everything that I ask for outside of the payment information. I'm asking for their first name and last name, their country, because I'm curious, not because I strictly need it, although I will need it in the very near future, thanks to the wonderful European Union and all of the VAT MOS changes that are coming down the pipe. Then I'm asking for an email address, an account name, and an account password. And that's all I need. I'm not asking for billing location, though, once again, I will, thanks to VAT MOS. I'm not asking for shipping information because I'm not shipping people anything. My shop is entirely digital products. And that might change in the future, but for right now it's not, so I don't need to have those form fields. However, collect as much information as you can. This is a screenshot from a plugin of mine called WooCommerce Customer History. It also exists for easy digital downloads, although it's called User History there. It also exists for iTheme Exchange. And what it does is very simple. It just taps into a user's browsing session once they hit your site. We capture the refer if it exists. Then we capture every single page that they hit in order from the moment they've entered your site until the moment they have successfully completed their checkout. We store timestamps so we know exactly how long a person is spending on the page, and we know the total time elapsed, and we know what time of day they're shopping, and all sorts of other cool things. And it's just really simple data, but it tells me at a glance a lot of very important things. For example, if I saw that someone hit the checkout page multiple times in a row, I know that they're having trouble at checkout. If I notice that everyone who comes through my checkout process is hitting the About page, maybe I should do something really cool on my About page, because that obviously has a lot of influence on the checkout process. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the cool stuff that it can do later on. But WP Sessions runs on WooCommerce. I also use Sensei, and I did this just because I was already using it for some other projects, so I had a strong level of familiarity with it, and I had a number of utility plugins that I'd written for a friend that I could easily repurpose for myself and get off the ground and running quickly. And so here's a look at my sessions page. This is the product archive for WooCommerce. For most shops, it would be at /shop if they didn't modify the defaults. For me, it's at /sessions. And it's just very simple. You see the product, you see the price, you see the add to cart button. If you click on the product, you get to the detailed page, which looks like this. And they can scroll down and see all sorts of interesting things about the product. But you'll notice I have an enormous orange add to cart button. There's no confusion when you hit this page what the next step is for how to get this thing in your cart. By the way, this WordPress and Backbone.js section, phenomenal. Cadam White, Carl Danley, Zach Tolman did an amazing job. It's free. You should definitely check it out because it is a really great way to get started with Backbone. Or if you've been using Backbone, it's a really great way to get started on some best practices. So there you go. Here's an example of one of my courses. This is actually a Sensei page, and this is one that Pippin recorded. And I tapped into using Sensei because I was already using WooCommerce, and they worked well together. And normally I like rolling my own stuff, but Sensei had a few features that I was interested in that I really didn't want to waste my time developing. So I spent a few bucks, bought it. It works perfectly. All of my lessons, or all of my courses are broken down into multiple lessons. And the ability to access a course is tied specifically to a product that people purchase, which in my case is a VIP membership. And I am, funnily enough, using some custom code to make that restriction happen, even though the code does exist to link Sensei to WooCommerce. I'd already written some code to work on my proprietary session, so I just adapted it for this. And for me, that was the simplest solution moving forward. Once again, things are only as complicated as you make them. I had to change one hook that I was tapping into, and suddenly my little function that restricted access to my sessions now restricted access to courses and lessons in Sensei. So going back to my user history extension example, we're tracking browser history. We're doing lots of really cool stuff there. But I'm also tracking purchase history. And I added this, I think it was this spring, because I started to get really curious about the customers that were coming through my site. And one metric I really wanted to know, because I had started offering sessions for free, which was actually a goal from the very beginning of WP Sessions, but I wanted to know how many people who were buying sessions were coming through having watched a session for free, and if that was a good marketing tool or not. It wasn't going to cause me to stop offering them for free, but I was just curious. And I wanted to know how often people are coming back to buy more sessions. So this is an example of someone's history. We can see here that they've completed 7 orders and that their actual lifetime value at my shop is $173, which is also something that I wanted to know. You know, what is the average lifetime value of any given customer? And so I just compiled my own report. I included it as part of my customer history extension so that I could have the browser history and the customer history all in one easy view. And I did this because even though these reports can be compiled and built in other ways, I wanted just a really fast, easy tool. And so to compound on that, I set it up to be included in my admin email. So every time I get emailed with a successful order notification, I also am notified with the person's browsing history and the purchase history. And I literally look at every single one of these to see, is this a repeat customer? How many times have they been to my shop? Do they like what I'm selling? And how long did it take them from when they hit my page to when they completed their checkout? How many pages did they stop through? Who is their referrer? And it's really fun to watch trends and see where people are coming from and what they're interested in and if they come back or not. And it's really easy to just get this at a glance because it's just in my email. Now, onto my more developer portion here. If you find something that you don't like about WooCommerce, you have the power to change it. And this is especially true if you're a developer because you literally have the power to rewrite the code. But everybody has the power to go to the GitHub repository for WooCommerce, which is at github.com/woothemes/WooCommerce, and open up an issue and say, hey, I want you to make WooCommerce more betterer. And then, no, really, please do that thing that I just said. And then you can submit an issue, and the contributing team at WooCommerce will review it, and maybe something will happen with it, maybe it won't. I would discourage you from submitting an issue like this because they're not going to do anything with this one. More constructive feedback might be, I really wish that the My Account page showed X, Y, and Z. Even better if you could explain why and provide examples of what you needed. Or if you find a bug, right? The best way to report a bug is to say, I was doing this, I was on this page, this is what I expected to happen, this is what actually happened. And I can't stress that enough. This is what I expected, and this is what actually happened. Rather than just saying, this doesn't work, please fix it. Well, what doesn't work about it? Be explicit, but don't write a novel because no one wants to spend 15 minutes reading through a ticket that could have been succinctly summed up in 10 sentences. And then if you're a developer, include some code with this. I did this, and I had some issues with how the My Account template was working. There were some things that I couldn't unhook because they were just hard-coded into the template. And I saw that everything else in the template was included into a template part. So I just did the same thing. I modified WooCommerce. I pulled those things out, put them in their own template, used get template part to put them back on the page, and then I submitted it as a patch. And I think it took like 1 day, maybe 2 days, and my code was accepted and rolled into WooCommerce Core, and it came out in the very next release, which was awesome. So if there's ever anything that you don't like about WooCommerce, you have the power to change it, and you have the responsibility to change it because you have now found something that doesn't work. You know that you can change it. You should go about making that change to make all of our lives more betterer. Oh yeah. In fact, here is that exact ticket that I mentioned. So I opened it on December 20th, 2012, and it was merged in on December 23rd. So it took 3 days. All right, I was off by a day. Still, that's an incredible turnaround for a project that's as huge and as well used as WooCommerce. I love the open source community. Go WordPress. So here I've got a few different code snippets to kind of give you an example of how easy it was to solve some of my problems. So a ways back, we looked at my checkout form, right, that only had just a few fields in it. This is the entirety of the plugin that controls that. WooCommerce has 2 different filters, one for billing fields, one for shipping fields. And you can unset any fields that you don't need, or you can add new fields that you do need. And in my instance, I just want to get rid of things that I don't need. So I didn't need any billing address information, and I didn't need any shipping address information. So I guess this is not the entire thing. There's an exact duplicate of what you can see here that's also for the shipping fields. Sorry, I'm a liar. But that's it. I just said, don't include any of these fields. Done. My tracking user history, here's the entirety of how I get that history included as part of the order that gets saved, because it's just meta. So when we are, or sorry, no, this is actually the tracking of. So person hits a page, and as long as it's not a 404 page, then we grab their history that they have stored with us to date. We figure out what page they're on. If it's an HTTPS page or an HTTP page, we grab the URL, and then we stitch it together. We add it to the history array, and then we store that with the rest of their customer history temporarily until the checkout happens. So this is how they hit a page, we store the URL, we save that, and we move on. And then when they check out and the order is actually being saved, there's a hook for that. Then I grab all of their history to date. I pump it through a sanitization function to make sure that we don't get any sort of weird data in. Let's say they were manipulating it because they knew that a certain cookie existed or whatever. Someone figured out how to manipulate it. We pass it through some sanitization so they don't actually do anything scary to our shop. And then we just run update post meta, and we store our custom post meta with the original order ID. And then we delete the temporary data, and that's it. Really, really, really easy stuff. I say really, really easy. I don't want to trivialize this. This took me a while to process and understand and simplify into this exact state. But my point is, when an order is saved in WooCommerce, a hook fires, and you can listen for that hook and then run update post meta and store whatever data you want in addition to the stuff that WooCommerce is already storing. And I meant to mention this earlier, Because orders are just posts, you could programmatically create whatever orders you wanted on the fly. You could programmatically create additional products on the fly. And there's a whole lot of really cool things that you can do that maybe you have questions about and we can talk about as we progress. And then for preventing content access, I mentioned that I had a little proprietary function that I run to make sure that people can't access my sessions unless they have a certain level of access. So here's my function, WPS user has access to session. It accepts a user ID, it accepts a session ID, which is the session post, not like a PHP session. And then we just do a few sanity checks here, make sure that we actually have a user ID, make sure that we actually have a post ID, make sure that the person isn't an admin, which is me. So if the user can manage options, then they always have access because there's no reason to restrict them. If they're not logged in, then we stop right here and say, hey, you actually have to be logged in to access this stuff. And then for everything else, we just run apply filters. And by default, we assume that the person does not have access to the session. And then I have, say, a half dozen different functions. So everything is very granular. Anytime I need to make a new modification, I just spin up a new function and apply it to this filter. And so I have checks to see, has the person purchased this particular session? Is it in their purchase history? Yes. Okay, they have access. Is this person a VIP? Yes, they have access. Did this person win a scholarship? And is it within the dates of where that scholarship is valid? Yes. Okay, they have access. And that's it. That's the entirety of how my simple content access system works. Oh, and here's a particular example of user has purchased session. So the very first thing I need to do in my system is get the connected product for the particular session that we're doing. So a session post is different from a product post. So they buy a product, and then via post to post, they're connected. They get access to the session. And we look to see, we use the WooCommerce customer bought product function to see, has the person bought this product? If they have, okay, they have access. If not, okay, well, we set the access to a string that says you must purchase whatever session, or whatever product to view the session. And then we give them a link to go and buy that product right there on the spot. Circling back to, you should build a system that is as easy as possible for customers to navigate. It would be entirely valid to say you do not have access to this session, but it is not entirely helpful. So in this case, I said, here's why you don't have access. Here's a link directly to how you can get access, saving them the step of having to look up what the heck's going on here. If they're not logged in, it says you must be logged in. And then I give them a login form right there in that spot. And that's it. So I have, what do we got here? We have just under 15 minutes for questions. And I see that you guys have asked quite a few. So I'm actually going to come back to being a real person with a real face, and I'm going to answer these questions for you. Hey, and there I am. So let's check out specifically what your questions are. And the highest voted one is actually a very tricky one. What are the top 3 tools to use when it comes to optimizing WooCommerce SQL queries? I don't know. I am not an expert, particularly when it comes to databases. In fact, I have a session that's coming to WP Sessions specifically about working with the database, when to create custom tables, understanding the schema that WordPress uses, when it's cool to make your own, et cetera, and so on and so forth, and writing very performant queries and how to measure queries. I can tell you the tools that I use to measure page performance in general. There is the WP debug bar, which adds a little debug tool to the admin bar, which is really cool. And then there are add-ons for that plugin that include query monitoring and things like that. There is a really cool plugin, I think it might be called Query Monitor, that I can't remember if it was written by John Billion or John Brindley, or neither. But it allows you to see every single query that happened on the particular page that you're loading and how long each thing took and what was slowing it down. And it's a really, really, really cool plugin. It doesn't give you the tools necessary to rewrite those queries, but it allows you to easily identify the queries that are slowing things down. For my site personally, I just use lots and lots of caching. So even though it sucks that some of the queries are slow, they don't have to run very often. And so I'm serving up cached pages for everything except for the cart, the checkout page, and the My Account page. Obviously, you don't want to cache the My Account page because you'd be caching it for the wrong person. But then everything else gets served up in a cached state. But that's awesome. I would say let's chat about that more in the actual chat here after I'm done answering more questions, because that's something I would love to see what other people have to say and hash out, because that's sweet. Next question is how to make my wall look like that amazing background here. Yeah, that's pretty good, huh? That's been my background for a long time. And then I moved this summer, and all of my awesome flair got packed away, and I didn't take it out until like 3 weeks ago. And so my background was just this really boring, depressing concrete wall, and I couldn't come down to my office because I was like, I just can't look at that for one more day. And so then I hung everything back up, and now it's wonderful and delightful, and I enjoy being here. All right, what are some of your favorite extensions for WooCommerce as a developer and as a customer? That's a good one. So I have a handful of little utility extensions that I wrote for myself. I mentioned that as I started out. Like, I've got the one that allows me to very quickly and easily limit the fields that appear at checkout. There's actually a more robust one that you can buy that lets you add and remove fields, but I didn't need that because I'm a developer, so I just wrote my own to just modify the filter. I really love my own customer history extension. It is so much fun to actually be able to understand the process that a customer went through, before they made their purchase, and to see how many times they're coming back. I love that. So I'm going to toot my own horn because it's really, really amazing. And if you're into marketing and you're looking to collect data and make informed decisions, it's the easiest way to do it, short of setting up a really elaborate analytics campaign with goals and lots of really good tracking, which you should also do. But to get off the ground, this has been amazing. I love the payment gateway extensions, of course. Stripe is my preferred way to handle money, but all of the PayPal ones work really well. The Amazon payment gateway is actually really cool. I don't know how many people use Amazon at checkout. I haven't done any sort of testing on this myself, but I've had a couple of customers who have, or a couple of clients who use Amazon Pay, and it will actually pull in and auto-populate user data from their Amazon profile, which is a really cool feature. There's another one that I use a lot that I'm having a hard time remembering right now. Oh, the customer CSV Export tool. I used that for probably about a year before I wrote something to automatically import customer data to MailChimp. And I loved it because I could specify the date range for when I wanted this export to happen and whether I wanted everything that a person purchased to be just in a comma separated list or to show up as separate line items. And it's particularly good now because they have it set up so that you can have automated exports from your shop. And that is very, very useful if you're selling physical products and you have a fulfillment service. So I have a friend who has, I think he's got 4 different shops now. Each of them are all just one product shops, and all of them are fulfilled by the same service. And he has the same customer service rep maintaining all 4. And one of his responsibilities, the customer service rep, every day at 4 o'clock was to go from site to site and generate the CSV export, review it to make sure that it didn't have anybody from the day before, and then send it along to the fulfillment center. And now he can just punch in the email address of the guy that he has to send it to, punch in the time that it starts, punch in additional parameters for what types of orders should be included. In his case, they only want complete orders, nothing pending, nothing canceled. And then it just automatically goes. Every day their customer service rep can just look in his own email because he has it sent to himself and to the fulfillment center. So he knows that it went out and the fulfillment center gets the email automatically every day, and then knocked off like an hour a day from his regular responsibilities, which is pretty freaking sweet. But that's enough time answering that one. We've got 5 minutes. I'm going to try and blow through the rest of these as quickly as I can. Taxes and shipping are not fun. Yeah. Yep. Any pro tips? Don't sell physical products. No, that's not the answer you want. Of course not. There are a handful of good extensions that help with shipping, that help with taxes. It's not something that I personally have to deal with for my shop because I only sell digital products. But for the people that have, I know that the Taximo extension just got a major update to support all of the VAT-MOS stuff that the EU is marching forward with, and that's now a free thing. The best pro tips I have is just to see if you can't outsource some of the tedium of that. Maybe you could hire an intern to be very thorough in looking up tax rules and checking into shipping things. And just making sure that things work really well. I prefer to automate things as much as possible, so I like to tap into shipping services like UPS or FedEx that will automatically generate the tracking number and the shipping cost estimations and stuff like that. For other things, there was a long time ago that I was helping out a shop that knew all of their stuff that they were shipping. It was all flat rate. They were all shipping everything via USPS because it was all local orders. And so they just set up table rate shipping and everything was simple there. But no, sorry, I don't have any really awesome killer pro tips for taxes and shipping. It's a headache that everyone deals with and everyone hates and no one ever has anything good to say about. Any earned achievements planned for WP Sessions in the future? Yes. So there's a cool plugin that I helped develop called BadgeOS, and it allows you to give achievements in WordPress for people completing any sort of arbitrary set of actions. There's an extension that I wrote for myself for WP Sessions to give out awards when someone watches a session. And my long-term goal is to give out badges for every session that I offer. So every time you watch a session, you get a new badge saying that you watched this. Every time you complete a course, you get a badge. And that integrates with a system called Credly, so that you can share those out with the rest of the world. It's a really fun way to kind of gamify the system. But I don't know when I'm actually going to get around to doing those. It's something I want to do, but it's just like one of those nice to have things. So it's not a pressing priority. What is the DeLorean in your background? So it's a really cool photo, or rather a very cool print that my loving wife bought me. And you can't really make it out because it's kind of dark in my office right now, but the DeLorean is actually made up of several different lines of text, all quotes from the movie. And of course, there's the quote below it. Wait a minute, Doc, you telling me that you made a time machine out of a DeLorean? It's a lot of fun. I have no idea where she got it. She might have bought it off of Etsy, would be my guess. So I would search for DeLorean Back to the Future print. Do you have a Dunning recommendation specifically with subscriptions? I don't. I think there's a typo in that question, so it's kind of hard to read. Apologies, Morgan, but I will be able to answer that one in the chat as soon as we're done, because I have exactly 60 seconds left here. And then the last question here is, what cache tool do you use on your WooCommerce site? So I host with SiteGround, who's actually a sponsor of WordSesh, and they have their own, I think they call it the Super Grinder or Super Cache. And it's actually an amalgam of a few different caching options that uses Varnish and Memcache and a few different things. And it all is custom built by them to work with their infrastructure and WordPress. And so it's really easy. I contacted their support and said, hey, I'd like you to turn this on. They turned it on. And that was it. Everything was cached and good to go. And that's all I use. I've heard other people have lots of great success with W3 Total Cache. Some people hate that and they prefer the other one, whose name I can't think of off the top of my head. There's lots of really good tools, and we can talk about this in chat. But I actually have to stop this broadcast because we have to get ready for the next one. So thank you all very much for watching and joining me. Hopefully you learned about some cool stuff with WooCommerce, but most importantly, remember that if you don't like something, change it. You have that power. Now go and make things awesome. Have a great night or morning if your day is just starting. Take care.